their parents are their income poorer income than us, and they come for Christmas, and we have this big party. So it suddenly struck me that, since this book was written, the narrator is a child, why don't I get these children to launch my book? So it was a wonderful, it was, it really was a wonderful idea, even if I say so myself. So I got the children to launch it. And I feel very, very happy about it. I feel very pleased that on Christmas morning, these children launched my book. So I hope it finds the grace of the Lord and people read it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, let's begin our program. Poets
Okay.
speak about poets. Fifth episode. Welcome to the We Are the World and We Are the People. We're gonna hear some nicest and fabulous poets from our panel members. This is about connecting people, knowing about the people, and great personalities from across the world. Is in the international segment of Poets Speak of Poets. Today we have Mr. Richard Temple, who will be talking about John Cooper Clarke. Mr. Henry L. Jones will be talking about Nikki Giovannni, and Chyrel Jackson will be talking about Gwendolyn Brooks. And Miss Lisa Tommy Johnny Weld will be talking about Rita Dow. I had the pleasure of having Dr. Rupali Sarkar, who is a former professor of English, Delhi University, Sri Venkateswara College, as a co-host. She's my mentor, and particularly to the fertile brains in general. So, without wasting much of your time, I would go across to Dr. Rupali Sarkargas, who would be kick starting this program with Henry, his bio and his introduction. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Prasanna. Thank you for inviting me to be on this program. And thank you, dear poets who are friends, for taking time off to talk to us and to tell us about some great poets who many of us have read and many of us have not read, and you will tell us about them. So we begin with our own well-known poet and award-winning poet, Henry L. Jones. Henry Jones is an award-winning poet and artist. Some achievements include the first poet laureate of Hendersonville, Tennessee, the Porch Writers Collective, O's Arts Artwire Fellow, National Black Poet Laureate Society's President, Academy of American Poets, listed poet, and others. He's published internationally. Some books include Run Into Blackness, Feeling My Poetic Gumbo, and Black Skillet Blues, Poetry Without Cornbread. It is a very short bio, but we know a lot more about you, Henry. So we look forward to hearing you tell us about the great poet Nikki Giovannni.
Hello, everyone. I love events like this because we come together and share, whether it's our own work or in this case, it's the work of someone else. Nikki Giovannni. That name I've heard through most of my life. And I attended college in Nashville, Tennessee, at a university called Fisk University. It's mainly known because the Fisk University, the Fisk Jubilee Singers. That's what put the school on the map. But it's also known in the literary world of noted scholars and writers. One of them was Nikki Giovannni. She passed away December the 9th of this year, 2024. And let me tell you, there's a huge gap to be filled because Nikki Giovannni attended Fisk University, and from her time as a student there throughout her life, she was 81 years old when she passed. She shared so much poetry. To give you an idea of her bio, we'd have to have this program, the entire program, because it includes audios, films, some plays, just so much. And also she inspired so many people. I just want to share with you today something that I wrote and shared on Facebook and some other social media sites. We've lost another legend. I can't believe Nikki is dead. She influenced me through her books. I remember when she visited Fisk University when I was a student there. I almost ran into her when rushing toward the administrative building. My eyes widened as I looked and then asked her, "Do you know who you are?" Nikki replied, "I hope so after all these years." "Do you know who you are?" She said, "I hope so after all these years. Do you know who you are yet?" We shook hands. She then asked me my major and where I was from. We walked together, meeting her, or we walked together toward the administration building. Meeting her changed my life. It really did. As I escorted her to the library, I just kept staring and smiling. There are many other memories, but none including meeting her in person again. As she entered the library, the director, she looked back at me before going into the director's office. One time, I was mush, like a small child. Rest in peace, Nikki Giovannni. You left us a wealth of literature in print, recordings, and appearances. Nikki was a Fisk graduate, Fisk forever. There are people, I know as a writer and as a reader, you read people, you read authors, and you establish or you create this personal connection where you even refer to them by first name as though you're friends. That was my first time meeting Nikki Giovannni and touching Nikki Giovannni. I had read so many of her works. And then later in Chicago and a couple of other cities, I saw her in crowds and audiences. And each time was a moment of inspiration. So today, I'm sharing some of her poems with you to do two things. One, to give voice to these words. And two, if you have never heard of her or read any of her words, I want you to use the wonderful internet to go out and read them. And of course, because of technology, you also have the opportunity to search her name, Nikki Giovannni, for video. And in that video footage, it would almost be like a ghost, where you will be able to hear her and possibly feel the power of her words. So let me get started here. This first poem is titled The Law of Motion. And this poem is actually, I'm going to recite this in a special program in early January under the National Society of Black Poet Laureates. We're honoring her. And this is the poem I'm reading in that program. The Laws of Motion. The laws of science teach us a pound of gold weighs as much as a pound of flour, though if dropped from any undetermined height in their natural state, one would reach bottom and one would fly away. Laws of motion tell us an inert object is more difficult to propel than an object heading in the wrong direction is to turn around. Motion being energy, inertia, apathy equals to hostility, violence being energy is its own virtue. Laws of motion teach us. Black people are no less confused because of our Blackness than we are different because of our powerlessness. Man, we are told, is the only animal who smiles with his lips. The eyes, however, are the mirror of the soul. The problem with love is not what we feel, but what we wish we felt when we began to feel. We should feel something. Just as publicity is not production, seduction is not seductive. If I could make a wish, I'd wish for all the knowledge of all the world. Black may be beautiful, Professor Amishu says, but knowledge is power. Any desirable object is bought and sold. Any neglected object declines in value. It is against man's nature to be in either category. If white defines black and good defines evil, then men define women, or women, scientifically speaking, describe men. If sweet is the opposite of sour and heat the absence of cold, then love is the contradiction of pain, and beauty is in the eye of the beheld. Sometimes I want to touch you and be touched in return, but you think I'm grabbing and I think you're shirking. And Mama always said to look out for men like you. So I go to the streets with my lips painted red, my eyes carefully shielded to seduce the world with reluctant lover. And you go to your men, slapping fives, feeling good, posing as a man, because you know as long as you sit very, very still, the laws of motion will be in effect. That's the laws of motion. That's one of my favorites as well. You know, when they said, thank you, read something with Nikki Giovannni, I'm like, oh my gosh, what should I read? Because there are a lot that I love. And I went thumbing through the books, and because I have some books that have her poetry. And I might add, in that introduction of that story, I didn't mention that she's an activist. And in the art, sometimes, well, many times, we have artists that will share maybe a mirror of life, but it takes courage to be an artist of any kind and also be an activist, because I believe, and it's reflected in Nikki's voice and many others that take on this pursuit, that when you label yourself and you are actually a participating activist in the world, your art reaches people. You are that voice for the voices, as they say. When people say that I'm the voice for the voiceless, and I back that up and I say, well, or I ask, well, what do you do? We write, but to write and then also get out there with the people, that's a twofold thing. That's something that's necessary. Nikki did that. Nikki did that. She lived during a time where there was a lot of activism, and her voice was there. Okay, let's move on. All right. So when I was looking for those poetry, I said, let me just use the internet and look for those poems that I love. And there we go. Oh no.
What happened?
It was nice going, but somehow we lost him. Maybe due to his connection issue or something. I tried to contact him.
I noticed that there was a delay in his, he'd be speaking and there was a delay in the audio, but oh dear.
Yeah, we could hear him, and it was nice. And somehow I'm trying to give him, passes this message. Let us see. Somehow it's quite awkward. Anyways, we try to. What shall we do now? Since he's gone, maybe he might get back.
I think he got up from his seat. He left to do something.
No, it was all of a sudden he might be not knowing of technical glitch or something. But shall we proceed? Shall we wait for him? Richard, what would you say? I mean,
Oh, sorry if I'm next. Well, I'm ready to go now. I don't know whether we should wait for Henry or not, though.
okay, Richard. I will I'll go with Richard, ma'am. I'll let me introduce Richard. Richard will be talking about Dr. John Cooper Clarke. Let me introduce you briefly about Richard. Richard Temple is a poet and writer living in Wales. He has been published in anthologies in the UK and India, as well as literary journals in Denmark, Japan, and the USA. He contributed the foreword to the lyrical poems by Gobind Biswas. His poem Atma, accompanied by self-composed music, is included in the permanent poetic phonetic collection at Red Door Gallery in Copenhagen. Another poem, Neuroverse, is cited as inspiration for Poppy, something naked, and something love. Many of his things. Last year, he co-presented Metaphor and Melody, and so he contributed interactive poetry display for art soup exhibition at Lamptere University Library. Over to you. That was Richard and Richard will be talking about, yes, Dr. John Cooper Clarke. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Prasanna. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, apologies. I was supposed to be on first, which might not have helped. Oh, Henry's back. Should we wait for Henry?
Go ahead. Well, I think Henry will go later. Maybe he could continue with his presentation. Okay, Richard, go ahead. No problem.
Welcome back, Henry. Okay, yes. So I'm going to do a piece about John Cooper Clarke first, then maybe we'll come back to Henry Jones a little bit later, because it looks like he's back now, hopefully. So John Cooper Clarke is, I don't know how well he's known outside of the UK. He's probably one of the best known contemporary poets in the UK at this moment. And I suspect he hasn't translated very much to the rest of the world because his work is very, very culturally tied to the UK specifically, and also the north of the UK. He comes from Salford, which is a town near Manchester. Was born in the 50s, and to a very working class family. And he's a bit of a maverick on the poetry scene, really, because he hasn't released that many books. He did 2 or 3 in the 70s and early 80s, 3 I think, and more recently he's released a couple in the last couple of years and an autobiography. In the meantime, there was very little production coming from Mr. Clarke, and this is partly Well, I'll start at the beginning because it's sort of relevant to the history of the man. But he's a self-taught working class guy. Never had any money, even despite his fame and influence. It was recently noted that everyone who has ever seen John Cooper Clarke has gone away and written poetry, and that's probably responsible for most of the British poetry scene, at least performance poetry scene since. Certainly lots of contemporary poets of today, like Thick Richard, Dave Viney, Wren, and well, most of them really owe a massive debt to John Cooper Clarke. John Cooper Clarke himself credits Pam Ayres as being the first sort of British performance poet who managed to get on TV really and sort of make a bit of a career out of it. So it gave him a belief that he could do it. But partly his lack of bibliography comes down to a belief in the performance of poetry. He's been known to state that books are where poems go to die, because the performance of his work and also the adaptation over time of his work keeps it as a living thing. And all throughout that time, of that 15 to 20 years where he released no books whatsoever, he was performing regularly, which is quite remarkable because the reason he wasn't writing is that he sank into a very deep heroin addiction. For 15 years, he did nothing basically but take heroin and tour. He was still performing. He had to be because it was his only income. He's living hand to mouth and largely at that time, I guess, paying for drugs. He's clean now, and hence the comeback. There's been a couple of books in the last couple of years, and he's been given an honorary doctorate now. He is Dr. John Cooper Clarke, of which he's very proud because it's not the sort of background he comes from. All throughout his career, he was more involved both in the performance side, but also he spent much of his early career certainly supporting bands rather than working on the literary scene itself. So many of his early releases were actually in the form of records. Record company put together a sort of group to back him, which I think it shows the power of his influence, that the backing band they put together included members of the Buzzcocks and 10cc, so quite across quite a broad spectrum of people who admire his work. And I think he's going to come across as quite a maverick within this setting too, because I think most people choose to talk about poets who write either deeply emotional or philosophical work or activism poetry, political or activism poetry, or romantic, or whereas Johnny Clarke writes about his life, and his life is from the north of England as a working class lad with, for most of his life, quite serious drug issues. So it's not pretty, but equally he tries to balance, because it's a performance poet, he balances that with humour. So there's a lot of humour in it throughout. He's now taught in the UK on the syllabus for basic English. His poem "I Want to Be Yours" is now taught at GCSE level in the UK, and it's also the most requested poem to be read at weddings, which is quite a surprising thing for someone that many people consider to be a punk rock poet. I didn't notice when I started talking. I guess I've gone about 5 minutes, have I? So I should probably get on and actually read some John Cooper Clarke. I'm going to start with "I Want to Be Yours," because this is very much the poem that reignited his career. As I say, it is now taught in schools, which is a remarkable thing. It was also released as a record by the Arctic Monkeys, which was quite a big hit. So that did an awful lot to reignite his career. And he's sort of ubiquitous in the UK now. He has a radio show, he's on TV all the time. But as I say, that was after a large gap between the 80s and 90s, really, where he did nothing at all. So many people don't even realize he had a career back in the 70s, and was already had 3 collections out by the early 80s. And this is from back then. This is an early work. This is called I Want to Be Yours. I want to be your vacuum cleaner, breathing in your dust. I want to be your Ford Cortina. I will never rust. If you like your coffee hot, let me be your coffee pot. You call the shots. I want to be yours. I want to be your raincoat for those frequent rainy days. I want to be your dream boat when you want to sail away. Let me be your teddy bear. Take me with you anywhere. I don't care. I want to be yours. I want to be your electric meter. I will not run out. I want to be the electric heater you get cold without. I want to be your setting lotion. Hold your hair in deep devotion, deep as the deep Atlantic Ocean. That's how deep is my devotion. So the language she's using in the tradition of such poets as William Wordsworth and the Romantic poets, the language she's using is very down to earth, and also colloquial language. Some of his rhymes only work with a Salford accent, actually, so it's always difficult for someone else to read it. But he does use rhyme, he uses rhythm. He doesn't use formal forms very much, although he does the occasional haiku, or to the extent that when he writes blank verse, he has to point out it's not meant to rhyme. And I think because his audience, the audience he's aiming at, is the everyday man. It's not a literary audience that he's aiming this at. So that in itself creates a different approach. This is the one that I've always wanted to perform this myself. So this is kind of why I wanted to talk about Johnny Clarke today, because it's an opportunity for me to perform this. And I think this is just as relevant now as it was when it was written in the late 70s. This is about a newspaper in the UK called the Daily Express, which is quite a right-wing newspaper, but also, as is much of the press in the UK, concerned with division and trying to divide society to sort of bring about excitement and make people buy stories so they get angry about things, but at the same time claiming a sort of moral high ground. And this is just as relevant now as it was then to both the press and, for instance, to Facebook. I think Facebook policies are summed up very well by this. This is called I've Never Seen a Nipple in the Daily Express. I've seen the poisoned pen letters of the horrible hacks about the yellow peril and the reds and the blacks and the TUC and its treacherous acts. Kremlin money, all right, Jack. I've seen how democracy is under duress, but I've never seen a nipple in the Daily Express. I've seen the suede jackboot, the verbal cosh, White House, white law, whitewash, blood uptown where the vandals rule, classroom mafia, scandal school. They accuse, I confess, I've never seen a nipple in the Daily Express. Angry columns, screaming pain, love in vain, domestic strain, divorce, disease eats away the family structure day by day in grim pursuit of happiness. I've never seen a nipple in the Daily Express. This paper's boring, mindless, mean, full of pornography, the kind that's clean, where William Hickey meets Michael Caine again and again and again and again. I've seen millionaires on the DHSS, but I've never seen a nipple in the Daily Express. So yeah, pithy, comedic, but also really has a point to make, you know, and it's put across in a way that the man in the street can enjoy without having to have a background in the Romantic poets, which is where it's really coming from at the end of the day. Bear with me, I'm having loads of technical issues today, which is kind of why I was struggling to go on first. This also expresses, I think, my point about him not working on higher principles, but rather trying to express the life that he experiences. And this is one of his best known poems from the very early days. This is called Beasley Street. It's about a fictional street in Salford, based on where he grew up. Far from crazy pavements, the taste of silver spoons, a clinical arrangement on a dirty afternoon, where the fecal germs of Mr. Freud are rendered obsolete. The legal term is null and void in the case of Beasley Street. In the cheap seats where murder breeds, someone's out of breath. Sleep is a luxury they don't need, a sneak preview of death. Belladonna is your flower, manslaughter your meat. Spend a year in a couple of hours on the edge of Beasley Street. Where the action isn't, that's where it is. State your position, vacancies exist. In an ex-certificate exercise, ex-serviceman excrete. Keith Joseph smiles and a baby dies in a box on Beasley Street. From the boarding houses and the bedsits full of accidents and fleas, someone gets it. Where the missing persons freeze. Where dead men's overcoats, you can't see their wearing dead men's overcoats, you can't see their feet. A rift joint shuts up, opens up, right down on Beasley Street. Cars collide, colours clash, disaster movie stuff. For a man with a Fu Manchu moustache, revenge is not enough. There's a dead canary on a swivel seat, there's a rainbow in the road. Meanwhile, on Beasley Street, silence is the code. Hot beneath the collar, an inspector calls, where the perishing stink of squalor impregnates the walls. The rats have all got rickets, they spit through broken teeth. The name of the game is not cricket, caught on Beasley Street. The hipster and his hired hat drive a borrowed car. Yellow socks and a pink cravat, nothing la-di-da. OAP, mother-to-be, watch the three-piece suite. When shit stoppered drains and crocodile skis are seen on Beasley Street. The kingdom of the blind, a one-eyed man is king. Beauty problems are redefined, the doorbells do not ring. A light bulb bursts like a blister, the only form of heat. Here a fellow sells his sister down the river on Beasley Street. The boys are on the wagon, the girls are on the shelf. Their common problem is that they're not someone else. The dirt blows out, the dust blows in. You can't keep it neat. It's a fully furnished dustbin, 16 Beasley Street. Vince, the aging savage, betrays no kind of life, but the smell of yesterday's cabbage and the ghost of last year's wife. Through a constant haze of deodorant sprays, he says retreat. Alsatian dog, the dirty days down the middle of Beasley Street. People turn to poison, quick as lager turns to piss. Sweethearts are physically sick every time they kiss. It's a sociologist's paradise, every day repeats on easy, cheesy, greasy, queasy, beastly Beasley Street. Eyes dead as vicious fish, look around for laughs. If I could have just one wish, it would be a photograph on a permanent Monday morning, get lost or fall asleep when the yellow cats are yawning around the back of Beasley Street. Okay, I have absolutely no concept of how much time I've done. I think, have I got time for one more? Give us a nod, Prasanna, if I've got time for one more.
Yes, for
I
a
can do.
minute.
Okay, I'm going to do I Don't Want to Be Nice then, which I think sums up his approach quite well. I had to be quite choosy actually with his work because he speaks very much in the language of the Salford working class. There's a lot of profanity in his work, so I've been quite careful to avoid the worst of that. This is called I Don't Want to Be Nice. Here he comes now. The fast fingers, the expert eyes, the same old how do you do. Disgust is just his dumb disguise. He wants a word with you. His problems are the end. A mouth needs exercise. The last thing I need is another friend. I don't want to be nice. I don't want to be nice. I think it's clever to swear. Better seek some sound advice. I would look elsewhere. Your face is an obvious case. I wouldn't put it about. This is neither the time nor place to sort your problems out. What you see is what you get. You only live twice. A friend in need is a friend in debt. I don't want to be nice. No, we never met before, I'm very happy to say. Far from perfect strangers, I'd like to keep it that way. I'm not your psychoanalyst. I'd rather talk to mice. You're so easy to resist. I don't want to be nice. Okay, is that me 15 minutes? I've got more if you want, but I think that's about it, isn't it?
Excellent, Richard. That was beautiful, and thank you for introducing John Cooper with his beautiful, poems through your
Thank you.
voice. Nobody, ma'am, would like to react. Yes.
Yes, it
Okay.
was, thank you so much. It was wonderful listening to your, your performance poetry. And I think, during the 70s, late 70s, there's this punk poetry. And, these boys would have their hair colored and they'd be wear strange dresses and, the rap music, that was all coming to India too. And I could see, I was teaching in the college and I could see students, their things changing, their clothes changing. And yes, it's a people's poetry. The strong thing about the little things that he talks about, are so specific to the everyday life of people, and that is what's very important. And the fact that the such poets also at that period were anti-authoritarian. They were against everything that seems stereotypical, traditional, very conservative. They were breaking out of all that, and it's been a pleasure listening to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
So,
However, we go across to
shall we
Henry and
Prasanna,
no,
shall we continue with Henry? He, I think, got interrupted.
yes. That's what I'm going to say. Henry, continue from where you stopped, maybe.
Yes, well, my laptop crashed. Forgive me. I love and hate technology. All right, let's continue with Nikki Giovannni. Next poem is titled Legacies. And I think that's appropriate because some of the things that's going on nowadays is just dealing with legacies in terms of families and remembering so much. Legacies. No. Moving. Her grandmother called her from the playground. Yes, ma'am. I want you to learn how to make rolls, said the old woman proudly. But the little girl didn't want to learn how because she knew, even if she couldn't say that, that would mean when the old one died, she would be less dependent on her spirit. So she said, I don't want to know how to make no rolls, with her lips poked out. And the old woman wiped her hands on her apron, saying, Lord, these children. And neither of them ever said what they meant. And I guess nobody ever does. Legacies. That makes you think because we say things and we hope that we tell the truth, but truly we don't. we really don't. We really don't in many regards. This next poem is titled Balances. I think we all try to do that, especially now with everyone wants to multitask and be at multiple places at one time. Balances by Nikki Giovannni. In life, one is always balancing. Like we juggle our mothers against our fathers, or one teacher against another, only to balance our grade average. 3 grains of salt to 1 ounce truth, our sweet black essence, or the funky hunkies down the street. And lately, I've begun wondering if you're trying to tell me something. We used to talk all night and do things alone together. And I've begun, as a reaction to a feeling, to balance the pleasure of loneliness against the pain of loving you. All right, let's go one more. We're going to hear some more wonderful poets. Resignation. I love you. Because the earth turns around the sun. Because the north wind blows north sometimes. because the Pope is Catholic and most rabbi Jewish, because the winters flow into springs and the air clears after a storm, because only my love for you, despite the charms of gravity, keeps me from falling off this earth into another dimension. I love you. Because it is the natural order of things. I love you. Like the habit I picked up in college of sleeping through lectures or saying I'm sorry when I get stopped for speeding because I drink a glass of water in the morning and the chain smoke cigarettes all through the day because I take my coffee black and my milk with chocolate because you keep my feet warm though my life is a mess. I love you because I don't want it any other way. I'm helpless in my love for you. It makes me so happy to hear you call my name. I'm amazed you can resist locking me in an echo chamber where my voice reverberates through the four walls, sending me into spasmodic ecstasy. I love you because it's been so good for so long that if I didn't love you, I'd have to be born again. And that is not a theological statement. I am pitiful in my love for you. The Dales tell me love is so simple. The thought, though, of you sends indescribable, delicious, multitudinous thrills throughout and through my body. I love you because no two snowflakes are alike. And it is possible, if you stand tippy-toe, to walk between the raindrops. I love you because I'm afraid of the dark and can't sleep in the light because I rub my eyes when I wake up in the morning and find you there. Because you, with all your magic powers, were determined that I should love you because there was nothing for you but that. I would love you. I love you because you made me want to love you more than I love my privacy, my freedom, my commitments, my responsibilities. I love you because I changed my life to love you. Because you saw me one Friday afternoon and decided that I would love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wonderful
Nick.
Nikki Giovannni, guys.
That was Nikki. Giovanni. The buddy, ma'am. Yes.
Yes, I love the poem that you just read. It's a very feminist poem. You know, it really talks about women, you know, how we completely submerge our lives in the name of love. And while Nikki Giovanni was, you know, a great activist for the enslaved people, her own people, she also, you know, wrote for the equality for women. And the fact that as a woman, our whole lives are just given away to a man. You know, what does he like eating? You know, how does he like sleeping? What should his bed be like? I mean, it's true of all of us. And thank you so much for reading out this poem. And you read it out the way it is written. I just read something, a little bit that I just read about her, which said that one of her quotes in which she says that you must be unintimidated by your own thoughts, because if you write with someone looking over your shoulder, you will never write. And I think that's true of us as poets, that we must never be afraid to write. And I think that's what Nikki Giovannni was, that she was never afraid to write, to say what she wanted to. Thank you so much. It's a wonderful presentation.
And the next would be about Gwendolyn Brooks. Another thing, and will be presented by Miss Chyrel Jackson. Ma'am, honor is yours to read the bio.
Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here with you. I am, like
Well,
was just stated, going to
yes,
do Gwendolyn
you got
Brooks today.
yes. See, just a moment. Dr. Rupali ma'am will introduce you. So, okay. Ma'am, you're muted.
Chyrel Jackson is a 2025 poet laureate of Garden O'Neuro Institute. Sorry, I think, sorry. She's an international, critically acclaimed poet and ranked the best-selling Amazon author. We'd love to hear you this evening, and your presentation, I'm sure, will be wonderful.
Hello. Thank you so much. I'm so happy and excited to be here and just share my love of Gwendolyn Brooks with all of you. Gwendolyn Brooks, like myself, was a Chicago poet, and really, in my thinking, a little underrated, because you don't hear a lot of people talking about her in the same way that you hear some of our more celebrated poets like Maya Angelou, Nikki Giovannni, and others, Langston Hughes. But I love Gwendolyn, I think, because she was a very quiet woman, but nothing about her writing was quiet. It was quite moving and firm and very deliberate in some of her messaging. She was an observer of people. And I think that came out quite profoundly in her writing, from just her general take of young teenagers hanging out at a pool hall when they should have been in school, um, to her poem, The Crazy Woman. She covered many facets of Black life, and that experience that she lived is what she wrote about mostly. So I'm happy to be sharing her bio with you guys, because as small as she was, that bio is quite huge. It's quite, um, the breadth and scope of it is just amazing. So I want to just take a minute to talk about that. She wasn't born in Chicago. She moved to Chicago. She actually was born in Topeka, Kansas, moving then to Chicago and spending so much of her formative years where she just amassed this huge literary resume. She was a librarian. She was an activist in social justice, social issues. Um, she spoke of women's rights, Black civil rights. She spoke of many of the issues that impacted everyday living for people of color, for Black people. And of course, she was a mom. She had two children, a son and a daughter. Her daughter is still living. She was married. She was so many different things. I mean, she was a Illinois poet laureate for 32 years. That's a long time. She held that title actually up until the time of her death, of which, when I say legendary, she had a pen in her hand because she was writing a poem and she died. So she died of cancer, but that's one of the fun facts that I liked. I mean, that was just so much a part of who she was that when she took her last breath, she was holding a pen in her hand and she was actually working on a poem. So I thought that was pretty significant. Another interesting, she was the first in 1950. She was a Pulitzer Prize winner. So that was the first poet laureate and then a Pulitzer Prize winner. So she had quite the resume. She was a Langston Hughes Medal awardee. She was awarded the Langston Hughes Medal of Writing, the Robert Frost Medal. She, just like I said, her writing resume was quite huge, and I loved her. Her writing style was quite lyrical with vivid imagery and deep emotional resonance. You could just tie into every aspect of her writing. So, having said that, I am now going to read the first poem. The first one I'm going to read is called Sadie and Maud. Maud went to college. Sadie stayed at home. Sadie scraped life with a fine-toothed comb. She didn't leave a tangle in. Her comb found every strand. Sadie was one of the livingest chits in all the land. Sadie bore 2 babies under her maiden name. Maud and Pa and Ma nearly died of shame. When Sadie said her last so long, her girls struck out for home. Sadie had left as heritage her fine-tooth comb. Maud, who went to college, is a thin brown mouse. She is living all alone in this old house. So that's the first one. The second one I'm going to do is called Truth. Truth. And if sun comes, how shall we greet him? Shall we not dread him? Shall we not fear him after so lengthy a session with the shade? Though we have wept for him, though we have prayed all through the night years, what if we make one shimmering morning to hear the fierce hammering of his firm knuckles hard on the door? That's true. This third poem is probably one of her most noted. It's got 2 different titles. It's known as We Real Cool. The name of the poem, though, is The Pool Players 7th at the Golden Shovel. That's the name of it. So I really love this. This is a fun piece. We real cool. We left school. We lurk late. We strike straight. We sing sin. We thin gin. We jazz June. We die soon. I love this poem, The Crazy Woman, because as I told you guys, she was a people person, but she was a quiet observer. So her writing catalog has all types of people in it. And this one is pretty self-explanatory, The Crazy Woman. It's fun, too. I shall not sing a May song. A May song should be gay. I'll wait until November and sing a song of gray. I'll wait until November. That is the time for me. I'll go out in the frosty dark and sing most terribly. And all the little people will stare at me and say, she is a crazy woman. who would not sing in May. And the last one I'm going to do for you guys, it's called Mayor Harold Washington. I love this poem. It's not one of her most famous pieces. It's one of her, obviously her later pieces, but I just love it. It's typical Gwendolyn Brooks. Mayor, worldmen, history men, beyond steps that occur and close, your steps are echo makers. You never be forgotten. We begin our health. We enter the age of alliance. This is our senior adventure. Mayor Harold Washington.
I just recently, just a couple of weeks ago, was introduced to her at a poetry workshop, California Poets in the Schools, and we used her Golden Shuffle as a prompt. Yeah, thank you. I love her stuff. Thank you so much for expanding on my knowledge of her. Thank you. That's great.
Thank you, Chyrel. It's indeed great listening about, knowing about Gwendolyn Brooks, Dr. Rupali ma'am.
Well, Isabel, that's the purpose of this program, that we actually come to know about poets that, have won a Pulitzer Prize. And yet maybe many of us have never read her. And now we will. You see, importantly, what you're doing for us is that you're introducing us to some great poets and writers whom, because of our limited, education or time or purpose, we have not come across them, but we're going to do that now, and we're going to read them. And since we were doing this, I also read. I also, went back to see, what you've been talking about. And I came across this quote of Gwendolyn Brooks, which I liked very much, which says that we are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. And what a wonderful thing to say. That the kind of, that we are as human beings together, we are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. And we are each other's magnitude and bond. So thank you so much for introducing her to us. Although she's so renowned, so well known. And thank you so much.
Yeah, for each other, we hear people will know the people, like Henry says in it's about Nikki Giovannni. Our next participant, speaker would be Lisa Tommy John Weld, who would be talking about Rita Dow. I now would love to introduce her bio, with her bio. Yes, she's a founder and manager of prolific Pulse Press LLC and a widely published poet and writer. Lisa is the editor of numerous anthologies and is an editor for Fine Lines Journal. Tommy John Weld is a poet laureate emeritus of Guardian of Neuro Institute and resides in North Carolina. He could go across to her website prolificpulse.com to know more about her. And over to Lisa.
Thank you, Prasanna. It's a delight to be here and an honor. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. I first learned about Rita Dove at a poetry brunch. It's a live event they have here in the area. Once a month, we have a person who brings a book of a poet who has received the Pulitzer Prize. And so we've been studying the Pulitzer Prize winning poets. That's how I became acquainted with Gwendolyn Brooks, and who is actually my #1 favorite poet. And then Reader Dove, the book that I was exposed to regarding her was this one here, Thomas and Beulah, which was her Pulitzer Prize winning book. And so I made it a point to get myself a copy and read and study about Rita Dove. I find her fascinating. I find her a poet that I can relate to. And in fact, also that she's only a couple years older than I am. But she's walked some paths that myself and my family have walked, including the fact that she graduated from the University of Iowa in Iowa City, which is also where my brother graduated, and a very good chance that they may have been classmates. My brother's no longer on this earth, so I don't know. But I would love to have been able to ask him, about Rita Dove to see if they knew each other. And because he was also in the same program that she was in. And so it just kind of made it more personal for me for that fact. She followed behind Gwendolyn Brooks for receiving her Pulitzer Prize, and also fast forward into the present is still a professor in Virginia. She has, like I say, crossed many paths in the United States, well known around the United States, and is a living poet. So there's still opportunities to get to know her. Starting out in Ohio, I started out pretty young in Ohio myself, so another ironic event for me. I like to look at the things personally and see where there are connections. But I think really what, despite, with all the awards that she's won numerous awards, many accolades for her. But the thing that about her poetry that stood out for me is the personal touch with her poetry related to like the memoir style of poetry that she has written. Also, the fact that she's a brave poet in my eyes, because she will experiment with poetry and does not get caught up in one particular type of form, but will try all kinds of forms and encourages other people to do the same. That's a poet speaking to my heart, because I believe in taking risk with poetry. From Thomas and Beulah, I would like to read the first poem called The Satisfaction Coal Company. And while Thomas and Beulah is meant to be read, from the first poem to the end in that order, of course, I'm not going to sit here and read the whole book to you, although I guess we could do that, but we don't have that much time. But this is The Satisfaction Coal Company. 1. What to do with a day? Leaf through jet, watch TV, freezing on the porch, goes anyhow, snow too high, or walk. The ice treacherous. Inside, the gas heater takes care of itself. He doesn't even notice being warm. Everyone says he looks great. Across the street, a drunk stands smiling at something carved in a tree. The new neighbor with the floating hips scoots out to get the mail and waves once brightly. Storm door clipping her heel on the way in. 2. Twice a week, he had taken the bus down Glendale Hill to the corner of Market, slipped through the alley by the canal, and let himself in. Started to sweep with terrible care, like a woman, brushing shine into her hair. Same motion, same lullaby. No curtains. The cop on the beat stopped outside once in the hour to swing his billy club and glare. It was better on Saturdays when the children came along. He mopped while they emptied ashtrays, clang of glass on metal, then a dry scutter. Next they counted nail heads studying the leather cushions. 34, they shouted. That was the year, and he found it mighty amusing. But during the week, he noticed more. Lights when they gushed or dimmed at the Portage Hotel, at 10:32, picking up speed past the B&O switch yard. Floorboards trembling in the explosive ka-chook, 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 and the oiled rails ticking underneath. 3. They were poor then, but everyone had been poor. He hadn't minded the sweeping, just the thought of it, like now, when people ask him what he's thinking, and he says, I'm listening. Those nights walking home alone, the bucket of coal, scraps, banging his knee. He'd hear a roaring furnace with its dry, familiar heat. Now the nights take care of themselves. As for the days, there's the canary's sweet, curdled song, the wino smiling through his dribble, past the hill, past the gorge, choked with wild sumac in summer. The corner has been upgraded. Still, he'd like to go down there someday, to stand for a while and get warm. The second poem I'd like to read is called Weathering Out. Like mornings the best. Thomas gone to look for work, her coffee flushed with milk. Outside, autumn trees blowsy and dripping. Past the 7th month, she couldn't see her feet. So she floated from room to room, house shoes flapping, navigating corners in wonder. When she leaned against the door jamb to yawn, she disappeared entirely. Last week they had taken a bus at dawn to the new air dock. The hangar slid open in segments, and the Zeppelin nosed forward in its silver envelope. The man walked it out gingerly like a poodle, then tied it to a mast and went back inside. Beulah felt just that large and placid a lake. She glistened from cocoa butter, smoothed in, when Thomas returned every evening, nearly in tears. He leaned an ear on her belly and say, little fellows really talking. Though to her, it was more like puck, puck, puck of a fingernail tapping a thick cream lampshade. Sometimes during the night, she woke and found him asleep there, and the child sleeping too. The coffee was good, but too little. Outside, everything shivered in tinfoil. Only the clover between the cobblestones hung stubbornly on, green as an afterthought. And the last poem I'd like to read is actually fast forward into the future years for Sophie, who will be in 1st grade in the year 2000. No bright toy, this world we've left you. Even the wrapping is torn, the ribbons grease-flecked and askew. Still, it's all we have. Wait a moment before you pick it up. Steady its scratches, how it shines in places. Now love what you touch, and you will touch wisely. May the world in our hands brighten with use. May you sleep in sweet breath and rise always in wonder to mountain and forest, green gaze and silk cheek. Dear Sophie, littlest Phoenix. I love Rita Dove, how in touch she is with the human condition and how she takes a look at the simplest things in life makes them sparkle before our eyes. Thank you.
So brilliant. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Really, it's beautiful. Yes, Rita Dow, Rupali, ma'am. Yes.
I just feel I'm so privileged this evening to hear some great poems and read by our great poets too. And because when we do something, when Prasanna initiates something, and I try to help him to go along with these kind of programs, I realize that we are learning so much, and that is most important for us. And Rita loves, famous quote which says that I think one of the things that people tend to forget is that poets do write out of life, and that is exactly what you were saying. That she touched so many aspects of life, and today we have had so many besides the punk writer. Of the 70s, this great writer. We have had African American writers. I've been very much influenced by them because of the kind of thing, besides having to write about women's equality, there's been race and gender that has to be, had to be taken care of. And it's been so difficult. In fact, I wrote a paper long ago called So Long a Journey, in which I had of course, dealt with Toni Morrison's novels. But that boat, those ships that brought and enslaved the people, and the kind of development today, and how far the African American writer or poet or person has come, it's something that only the individual whose history is that way can understand. And to have these great poets here among us today is a privilege. It's almost sacred. To me, it's very sacred. I'm sorry if I'm being emotional about this, but it's a very sacred moment for me to hear these poems. And so I can only thank you. And I can see Margaret, my dear friend, is here. And Isabel, you're here. Yeah, Margaret. Next time you should be here. Margaret lives in
We
Wales, and she's a
would
very
love to have
renowned
your,
yes.
comment on this,
Yes, we
the
would like
so
you
far.
to say something. Yes, please.
A few
We'll,
words from Margaret and Isabel.
You're muted, Margaret. There you go.
Just realised. Thank you. Yeah. Hi. Yeah. Thank you very much. It's been absolutely fascinating to listen to, find out about these poets. 3 of the 4 I've never even heard of, so I should now go and look them all up and read some more. So that's been really good. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. Thank you, Prasanna. Thank you, Rupali, for organising these, and thanks to all the brilliant poets you've got there. Yeah, it's been great.
Isabel, thank you.
My life has gotten so much bigger with poetry. I moved to California in February of this year, and I was back east, Massachusetts and New Hampshire for almost 22 years. And I had my own open mic for 10 years. And it was, I mean, I am not a poet from age 8 or anything like that. 2008 is when I started writing poetry because a friend knew she didn't have a car and she knew that I did. And so she talked me into giving her a ride every Wednesday night to this open mic in Lynn, Massachusetts. So I started from there. And now that I'm not working full time, although I could certainly use the money, I'm spending more time with poetry, and I'm learning so much. And it is, the poetry that really speaks is
yes.
when we write from our experience, our hearts, our guts. Anybody will relate, no matter what your background, how you grew up. It's amazing. And we're, we're all one, no matter how different we are as individuals. And I really, really appreciate this. And last year, as a matter of fact, the Thanksgiving week here, I was in Wales. I was in Swansea, Wales, and with my friend Annie Palesci, who's a poet. And anyway, the world is small, thank goodness. And I love to travel. The landscapes are very different, but the people are always wonderful. So thank you, Prasanna. This was great. And Rupali, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
Lisa and Henry and Richard. And is your first name Chyrel, CJ? Or they call you CJ? Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. Really, this has
Thank
been
you,
wonderful.
Sabel. Margaret herself is an activist. She's a poet activist, and she does a lot for people, immigrants, and so on. And I think next time you have to be on this program,
I don't
Margaret.
think I'm
Yes.
clever enough.
I was
Clever enough.
well, I was on the program a few months ago and talked about Emily Dickinson.
Yes.
You know, yeah. So anyway, thank you.
Well, thank
Thank
you,
you so much.
Lisa, for joining. And you have, saving grace, angel for us today, because you are accepted the invitation on the introduce. I'm the, of course, CJ. The credit goes to CJ who introduced us to Lisa. And Lisa, thank you for us accepting. And Henry, Richard, of course, has joined after a long gap. I could keep on repeating that, but a special attraction today is that the joining of Margaret and Isabel being an audience. We look forward to your joining on Sundays and open recitals, my dear friends and audience as well. On that note, please stay tuned for the next announcement of Poets Speak of Poets. Signing off.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for this. It's wonderful.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Thank you.